Currently, the war in Ukraine has become the most intense battle using drones in all of human history. In the year 2025, almost every week, Russia launches more than 1,000 Shahed drones targeting the cities and key facilities of Ukraine. Ukraine did not fall behind either. They used cheaper quadcopters as well as their own long-range drones. Because of this, commanders and strategists on both sides ended up in a difficult situation. But before we continue, please like this video. It means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. Think about it. How would you explain using a very expensive interceptor worth millions just to shoot down a drone that only costs around $50,000 as the fight drags on even longer? To make things harder for the existing air defense systems, they have to guard approximately 860 miles of front line. And not only that, they also have to cover a vast area that stretches for several dozen miles in both directions. Because of this, the defense is very thin in many areas. But after 4 years of continuous war, Ukraine has come up with some unique solutions to this problem. And based on the initial reports, it looks like they've found one of the most elegant and effective answers. This is a new weapon, a laser weapon called Sunray. On February 10, 2026, The Atlantic released a report about a field demonstration of a secret project. According to the report, it was quietly developed for almost 2 years by Ukrainian soldiers and engineers. Exactly 1 month after that, on March 10, 2026, Ukrainian journalist Andriy Chaplienko released footage. In the video, you can see a unique weapon being used against a real Russian target in an actual battle. What makes this weapon unique is that it doesn't fire bullets. Instead, it uses what is called directed energy. It can cut the fiber optic cable attached to the drone and connect it to its operator. When the cable is cut, control of the drone is lost. It becomes useless without even a single shot fired. What's even more interesting is that the footage itself was taken from a Russian military drone. In the video, you can see what looks like a circular light floating in the air, but in reality, that's just an effect caused by the camera angle and the reflection of light. For some people, it looks like a scene from science fiction, but in reality, it's a simple yet extremely powerful laser beam directly hitting its target. If you examine the Sunray, it's the third laser weapon that Ukraine openly confirmed they developed since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. And based on what we see and know so far, this could be one of the most practical and intelligent answers to the worsening problem of drone warfare. The first laser weapon that Ukraine showcased was called Trizub, which means trident. This was confirmed by their unmanned systems forces in early 2025. And it can hit targets flying at altitudes above 2 kilometers. The second system that followed was called Slim Beam. The details about this are clearer because it was the Ukrainian Defense Ministry itself that released the information when it was introduced. They showed how powerful the weapon is and how far it can reach. Both Trizub and Slim Beam have sufficient details. That's why it's easy to understand what they can do. But when it comes to Sunray, a different approach was taken. It was introduced quietly. There was no big announcement and almost no information was released. Up to now, there is still no exact data on how powerful it is, what its range is, or how effective it is in actual combat. The lack of this information is important because there is a reason why it is being kept secret. One of the things that has been shown about the Sunray is its appearance. And just from this, you can already see the big difference. It's not like the laser weapons you see in movies. There's no big machine, no generator as big as a truck, and no control room full of lights and screens. According to the Atlantic's description, it actually looks more like a simple telescope used by hobbyists. There are 2 cameras, one on each side, and the whole unit fits in the trunk of a regular car. In the demonstration, it was simply placed in front of a pickup truck when the weapon was used on a drone. The drone, which was several hundred yards away, suddenly burst into flames. In just a few seconds, it fell from the sky in flames. The whole process was almost silent. No bullets or missiles were used. The effect was quiet but direct. This is where it becomes clear why this type of weapon is important. In conventional defense, every use of an interceptor comes with a cost. Each missile needs to be manufactured, purchased, and tested. This means that every target hit comes with a significant cost. But with a laser weapon like Sunray, energy is used instead of ammunition. Because of this, the cost per use could be much lower. In these times when drones need to be taken down almost every day, this kind of solution is a big deal. Before, there was a limit to how much Ukraine could spend on anti-drone warfare that didn't use electronics or their own drones. This means that if they don't use drones, the only option left is to try to disrupt the connection between the drone and its operator. But when fiber optic drones came out in 2024, it became much harder. Because the connection is wired, signal jamming is not enough. You really have to cut the actual cable to lose control of the drone, and if you can't do that, its operation will just continue. This is where the value of a laser weapon, like the Sunray, comes in. As long as there's electricity, it can be used repeatedly with almost no cost per use. There's no ammunition that needs to be replaced. You don't have to make a new missile each time. Compared to the time needed to prepare and launch a Patriot missile system interceptor, a laser weapon could have already targeted hundreds of drones. And the price of each Patriot missile is no joke. Each one costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Aside from that, it's more suitable against aircraft or powerful cruise missiles, not against the cheap drones that are often used nowadays. So if you look at the costs, lasers are more practical, especially in a war where it's all about who has more resources and who can endure longer in battle. If the idea of a silent beam that can burn a target in just a few seconds sounds familiar, you're not mistaken. Back in the 60s, this was already shown in Star Trek. The crew of the USS Enterprise used what they called phasers, energy beams that could stun, disable, or completely destroy a target. Then came Star Wars, where even bigger versions were shown, like turbo lasers and the Death Star, which could destroy an entire planet using an energy beam. For many decades, stories have repeatedly explored the idea of a weapon that uses light instead of bullets. But in real life, the Sunray is still far from that level. It can't destroy tanks or thick steel, but the principle is the same. It focuses enough energy on a small area until that spot gets extremely hot and damages the target. And this idea has been studied for a long time and is slowly becoming a reality now. All the Sunray needs to do is heat up the inside of a small drone excessively or burn its thin frame from a distance of several hundred yards. This isn't about extreme power like in the Philippines. The principle is the same, just on a smaller scale. And that's exactly what Ukraine needs because they face many drones every day. I saw how this works in a video from February. A small drone was flown several hundred yards away. The system automatically tracked it, using its cameras and continuously locked onto the target. A few seconds after the command was given, the drone suddenly caught fire and crashed. In the video from March, it did something different. It didn't target the drone itself, but instead targeted the fiber optic cable attached to it. This is the line that connects the drone to the operator on the ground. When the cable was cut, the drone didn't explode. It also wasn't immediately damaged. It simply lost control and eventually crashed. In a way, this approach is cleaner. There's no fire that could cause additional danger. There's no debris that could fly anywhere. The only thing that was damaged was the cable used for the video feed. That's how the drone is controlled. Even though these demos are in a controlled setup, the idea is still clear as to why this is important in actual combat. Russia is increasingly using what they call waiting drones. These are drones that just hover near the front line while attached to a long fiber optic cable. The signal passes through the cable so they don't rely on GPS and are not affected by jamming. This is where Ukraine is having problems. Methods like jamming and GPS spoofing that are effective against Shahed drones and commercial quadcopters don't work against drones that are directly controlled using a cable. But if there's a laser that can cut the cable in just a few seconds, This provides a solution to a problem that previously had almost no good answer. In close combat, small quadcopters modified to drop grenades or carry explosives are also a big problem. This is one of the most common weapons on the front line. It often harasses and intimidates soldiers on the ground. These drones are cheap to make, many can be deployed, and they're hard to shoot down with regular weapons. So as the war goes on, new methods like Sunray become more important to keep up with this kind of threat. Imagine a defense that can take down a drone in just a few seconds, silently, with nothing left. There's no light that obviously comes from a gun and no bullets that run out. It doesn't reveal where the operator is because it makes almost no sound. For a small unit like a company or battalion, this is a huge help. Just put this in the vehicle, connect it to the generator, and let the tracking system do the work. As each small FPV drone approaches the defense, it can be targeted right away, and with every use, there's almost no cost. This is where Sunray's story becomes more remarkable when you look at the numbers. According to reports, its development took about 2 years. Some estimates say the prototype cost several $1,000,000. But if this is produced in more units, the price could possibly go down to a few $100,000 each. For comparison, one of the closest examples is the Helios laser weapon system of the U.S. Navy. Helios stands for High Energy Laser with Integrated Optical Dazzler and Surveillance. This was made by Lockheed Martin under a contract signed in 2018 worth $150 million. And that's just for development, not including the costs for manufacturing and deploying multiple units. There are even studies saying that if the entire program is included, it could possibly reach almost $1 billion. There's no doubt that the American system is more powerful and can handle heavier tasks that the Ukrainian prototype can't match. But if we're talking about what's actually needed on the front line, like taking down small drones near the soldiers, Ukraine's approach is more practical. It's cheaper, simpler, and easier to use given the number of targets that need to be dealt with every day. The difference becomes even clearer when you look at other laser weapon development systems.
Noong 2025 sa kanluran.
For example, Rheinmetall, together with MBDA, has long been developing a laser system to be installed on ships, starting as early as 2019. This shows that while other countries are focused on large systems for ships or high-level defense, Ukraine has created a simpler but more direct solution for what they need most in battle. By early 2026, this program will have completed more than 1 year of trials and over 100 live fire tests. But even while still in testing, the budget committee is already worried because of the high costs. It has already reached around 462 million euros, which is almost $548 million. And that's just for the demonstrator phase. Meanwhile, the Australian company Electro-Optic Systems also has its own laser weapon called Apollo, which has 100 kW of power. In August 2025, it secured its first export contract, and the buyer was the Netherlands. These kinds of systems have been in development for a long time and have been subjected to the Western military's strict standards. They need to prove that they are reliable, compatible with other systems, and can last for a long time. Because of this, development takes longer and costs increase. In comparison, Ukraine chose a different direction with Sunray. This was not made to be overly complicated or too expensive. Its focus is to be affordable, quick to produce, and easy to deploy even in the middle of a war. And above all, it was made for a clear problem: the large number of drones that continue to pose a threat on the front line. If Ukraine manages to produce the Sunray in large numbers, it will have a significant impact. This is not certain yet, but if it happens, the balance in defense will change. For now, Ukraine's air defense is layered. At the farthest range, there's the Patriot system, which is used against ballistic and cruise missiles. In the middle range, there are other systems that intercept targets at intermediate distances. And at the closest range, the soldiers themselves take action, using machine guns, electronic warfare tools, and even improvised methods to bring down drones. This is where Sunray comes in. It can be placed in the closest layer as a silent defense that doesn't use bullets. It doesn't deplete the stock, and it doesn't deplete missile stocks, which are always in short supply and need to be replaced. If each unit costs several $100,000, it can possibly be distributed to many locations, from brigade down to battalion positions. And when that happens, Ukraine's ability to face the continuous threat of drones on the front line will become stronger. Even if there aren't that many units yet, if Sunray is deployed to different parts of the front line, it will immediately be a big boost to Ukraine's defense against drones. At close range, and importantly, this is done without increasing the cost of interceptor missiles, which is one of the heaviest expenses in the entire war. There's also something unique about how Sunray was developed. It shows Ukraine's style when it comes to creating new technology while at war. According to reports, the project started about 2 years before it was presented to the public in February 2026. That means it was started around early 2024. This was also the time when Russia's use of Shahed drones increased significantly, and Ukraine was struggling to keep up with the defense because of a lack of resources. The engineers didn't go through a long process. They didn't have the luxury of spending years on development, lengthy bidding processes, or multiple rounds of government approval. They saw the problem, quickly came up with a solution, and kept refining it until it was ready to be shown to a journalist from the Atlantic. Compared to the West, the speed of this approach is far greater. For example, the development of laser weapons by the U.S. Navy has taken more than 2 decades. In Germany, their ship-based laser has been in development for at least 6 years and is still not fully used in actual operations. In the UK, the Dragonfire program started back in 2017 and only had a successful test in 2024. The reason why this process is slow in the West is because they make sure it's safe, compatible with different systems, and can be used for a long time. Sometimes it takes up to 30 years. But this kind of system doesn't match the rapid pace of change in drone warfare in Ukraine. While the development of a weapon takes time, the enemy's drones continue to improve. By the time a new system is finished, there might already be 2 or 3 new versions of drones that it needs to face. That's why in Ukraine's situation, speed and practical solutions are more important than a perfect design that takes many years to finish. Ukraine can't afford to wait for a perfect solution. What they need is something that works well enough right away and can be produced in quantities that will have an impact on the fight. This is the kind of mindset that pushed them to create many rapid innovations, even though they have fewer resources compared to their enemy. During wartime, they don't prioritize long-term use or compatibility with different systems. They also don't worry about how good it looks on paper. What matters is that they have a working solution before the next wave of Shahed drones arrives. But even with this practical approach, there are possible limitations to Sunray. In the demos, it was shown that it can bring down a small drone from several hundred yards away. In another video, it was shown that it can cut a cable at almost the same distance. But this still doesn't answer the questions that are important for actual defense. What really is its maximum range? How much power does it use? What happens when there is rain, fog, dust, or smoke, which are common conditions on the battlefield? Also, how fast can it keep up with a drone that moves quickly compared to a drone that's just hovering? In a report released in December 2025, the RAND Corporation said that directed energy weapons are not yet fully mature and cannot be considered a reliable solution at this time. There are clear reasons why. First, it requires sufficient power and support equipment to operate continuously. Second, it is limited to line of sight. This means it cannot hit targets that are obstructed or too far away. Third, air conditions have a significant effect. The laser is affected by moisture, dust, and other particles in the air. When the weather is clear, it's good. But in real combat, that's not always the case. Usually, testing is done in good conditions or with controlled simulations of bad weather. But on the actual battlefield, the conditions are more complicated and it's hard to predict if the results will be the same. There's another limitation that can't be avoided, and that's because of physics itself. To bring down a small drone from a few hundred yards away, you need to focus enough energy on a small
bahagi sa loob ng maikling
If the power is insufficient or the focus isn't precise enough, it won't be effective right away. Bringing down a Shahed 136 flying at around 110 miles per hour from almost a mile away is a whole different level of challenge. This requires higher energy, more precise tracking, and a longer time with the beam focused on the target. For now, it seems Sunray can't achieve this. That's why it's more likely to be used only against small drones at close range. This is not a minor limitation. The Shahed is one of the weapons that has caused the most damage in Ukraine. These are the drones that destroyed power plants, caused blackouts in the middle of winter, and killed civilians even when they were inside their homes. If Sunray can't handle this kind of drone, it can't be considered equivalent to an all-in-one defense system like the Iron Dome. It's more accurate to see this as a tool meant for specific situations, especially for close-range threats, which is important but only a part of a larger defense. This is also the direction Ukraine is taking when it comes to their air defense. They don't rely on a single solution. They're building a layered system where each part has its own role. According to reports, Volodymyr Zelensky tasked Pablo Yelizarov to build an integrated defense to protect key areas before the summer of 2026. The timeline is tight and it's not easy, but the direction is clear. In this plan, lasers like Sunray will be used for close-range defense. The CDIS is also included, an autonomous interceptor drone system that can launch upwards and chase its target using cameras and AI. There's another system called P1 Sun. From Skyfall, a reusable interceptor drone with a record of shooting down over 1,000 targets. Meanwhile, the more expensive missiles from the West, like the Patriot missile system SAMS and IRIS, are reserved for the most dangerous targets. These are the ballistic missiles and advanced cruise missiles that drones or short-range lasers can't handle. Overall, the strategy is clear. No single weapon is the answer to everything, but rather a combination of different systems working together to cover every type of threat. And in that setup, the good plays an important role, even if it's not at the very center of the defense. In the defense setup, the principle is clear. If the threat is cheaper, it should be dealt with in a more cost-effective way. There's no need to use an expensive missile if a simpler solution can handle it. But even though Sunray is promising, there are still questions that need to be answered. There are still no clear details about its power, how far it can reach, and how it works when there's rain, dust, or smoke. This information is important because it will determine how effective it really is in actual combat. Once these numbers come out, only then can it be determined how many units Ukraine needs to have a real effect against the number of drones they're facing. That's also when we'll know the total cost to reach that level. For now, Sunray is a strong idea that has already been proven in some tests, but it's not yet a complete solution. Even so, there's one thing that remains constant. Ukraine has repeatedly shown in this war that they can catch up and close the technology gap that once seemed impossible to reach, and they're doing it faster than expected and at a lower cost compared to Western programs. From idea to actual demo, it only took 2 years. The prototype only cost a few $1,000,000, and when mass-produced, it could go down to a few $100,000 per unit. A system that can take down a small drone within seconds, with no bullets, no loud noise, and no clear indication of where the attack came from. In a war where small advantages matter and resources are constantly being depleted, this kind of technology is not just a simple upgrade. This could be the beginning of a bigger change in the way wars are fought.